Hello and welcome to what I think is episode 86 of 10,000 Stitches podcast, a somewhat weekly chit-chat all about the joys of knitting. If you were looking for me / this podcast on the interwebs, you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Ravelry as Purlbug, P-U-R-L-B-U-G. You can find my blog at thepurlbug.com, and then we have the 10,000 Stitches podcast group on Ravelry. If you're looking for like links to anything that I mentioned today, patterns, shops, anything that I mention, you can, if you're watching this via the embedded video on the blog post or the Ravelry thread, everything will be linked right below the video. If you're watching this on YouTube, in the description box below the video, there will be a link to the blog post. You can click that, go there, and then like I said, everything will be linked right below the video. Yeah, today is Sunday, January, is today the 21st, and this episode will go up on Tuesday, January 23rd then. Whoa, crazy to believe, or crazy to think that we're almost like at the end of January already. Mind-blowing to me. Anyway, yeah, it's going to be a pretty usual episode today. We'll have some, do I have a yes, I have a finished object to show you guys. I have some works in progress. We'll talk a little bit about what's coming up next. I have some dyeing to show you. I have some new things to show you and talk about. We'll talk about the current knit along, question of the week, and then chit chat. So pretty standard episode, which means we should get right into it. So this first finished object is actually something that if you follow me on Instagram, you would have seen the almost finished version of it a few days ago. But these are my Vogue Knitting Live socks, which I actually just realized I forgot to weave in the ends on the second one. So sort of not finished, 98% finished. But the point is, they are done. So these are the socks that I was knitting when I was on my way up to Vogue Knitting Live and then also coming back. And they are just a pair of short socks. Let me get them on the blockers so that they will actually, you know, look like something. But yeah, these were sort of a pattern that was just in my head, and I wanted it to become reality, and so I sort of just made them up based on how I normally make socks. And once I get them on the blockers, I will talk a little bit about sort of the I don't know, you know, the non-vanilla features of them. And yeah, so let me, here we go. Okay, so first let's talk about the yarns. So this crazy multicolored variegated yarn you guys have seen before if you've been around for a little while. This is a yarn by Shoesting Hat Designs. It's a 7525 BFL nylon sock yarn. This is her Drunken Rainbow colorway, and I've knit a couple of short socks out of it before, so I had, you know, some left. And then this green, then I guess it's easier to see here. This green is one of my hand-dyed yarns. It's also 7525 BFL nylon, so I figured the two bases are roughly the same, so they could go together. And this one, let's see, I made a pair of broken seed stitch socks, I believe, out of this and a hot pink a while ago. And I've also done a little bit of color work with this, but again, I had enough left that I knew I could make a pair of short socks with it, so I chose those two to go together. And so basically the colors are inverted, as you can tell. But I will just hold up this one because I can't hold both of them and point to things. So we'll just look at this one for the time being. So basically the features of this guy is it has a rolled cuff instead of a ribbed cuff. And then it has this sort of, what I call 1x1 stranded. It's not a, it's not corrugated ribbing, which I believe is where you do like knit and purl, like you sort of rib, but in color work. This is just, you know, knit one main color, knit one contrasting color, right? So I just call that 1x1 stranded. I don't know, that makes it easier for me. So this is a little band of this 1x1 stranded pattern, and then a contrasting heel. And then I think you guys can see this. So let me see if I can focus a little bit closer. So you can see here, I actually did something that I've done before, which is to put the gusset decreases on the bottom of the sock. So normally they would kind of come along here, and instead they decrease along the bottom of the foot. I'll talk in just a second about why that is. And then we have another band of this 1x1 stranded as soon as the gusset decreases are done, and then sort of a just plain vanilla foot, and then a little bit of this 1x1 stranded to go into the contrasting color toe. Okay, so why did I do the gusset decreases like this? Like I said, I've done them before, and I really like these sort of gusset decreases along the bottom of the foot because I feel like, especially on short socks, and I think I've talked about this before, I have a lot of trouble on short socks with them sort of slipping down underneath my heel. And, you know, part of what I've learned to deal with that is just to make sure that I do, you know, a decent amount above the heel flap. Like no-show socks have never worked for me. Even commercial ones don't work for me. So, you know, no surprise that hand knit ones wouldn't work either. But I find that doing the gusset decreases like this along the bottom helps it to kind of hug my heel a little bit better. And I think that might just be because I have narrow heels, but I really like it for short socks. And the problem is that it looks a little bit goofy. So like if I take it off the blocker, you can see that it produces kind of a goofy looking sock to have the gusset decreases here, because it kind of makes the underside of the heel bubble out a little bit. But I will take a kind of goofy looking sock if it fits better. So that's why I did that on these. But yeah, and then obviously I inverted the colors on this one, but everything else was the same. And I'm really excited to wear them. I'm actually not going to wear them yet because I want to get a pattern written up for these. So I want to make sure that I have them as a sample to take pictures of before I wear them at all. So yeah, those are my finished object. And then speaking of writing up sock patterns, that sort of leads me into one of my works in progress. So those of you who, again, follow me on Instagram or are part of the Ravelry group will know that, oh, when was it? Was it before Vogue Knitting Live? It might have been before Vogue Knitting Live. Anyway, about a week to 10 days ago, I finally finished getting my vanilla sock pattern written up, and I put a sort of draft of it on Ravelry along with a call for people to test knit it, because of course I know that the stitch counts are correct for like the 64 stitch sock, which is what I usually knit, and I know that it's correct for the 72 stitch sock because I also knit 72 stitch socks frequently, but I wanted to include a 56 stitch size, so I just wanted other people to check my math and make sure that it all worked out. So I've had people report back and say that every single size works out with the stitch counts that I give in the pattern, so that's awesome. And so I am planning on getting it, properly formatted into a PDF so that it's, downloadable and printable and everything, and released out into the world. And basically all that I'm waiting on for that is getting my samples knit up for it. So I am currently working on the first sample sock for this. And again, I will get this put on a blocker so that it's a little bit easier to see. But this is just a vanilla sock. Using sort of my sock recipe that I've come up with, over the, oh my gosh, two years now or so that I've been, knitting socks. Like this is basically just taking everything that I do to knit a vanilla sock and putting it all together into a pattern. So this is how it looks so far. It's kind of not quite centered on the blocker, but anyway, this is how it looks so far. So as you can see, I am through the gusset. This one I'm doing traditional gusset decreases on because that's what I do most of the time. But yeah, otherwise it's just totally vanilla. I have a contrasting heel cuff, and I'll have a contrasting toe on it as well. But otherwise just totally vanilla. I'm done with the gusset decreases and I'm just now making my way down the foot, and then I just have the second one to get knit up. This is a 64 stitch sock that I'm knitting on a US size 1. The Vogue Knitting Live socks that I showed you guys, those were also 64 stitches on a US 1. So, and this yarn is some of the yarn that I used a while ago for dyeing. This is a 80-20, I think, superwash Highland wool nylon blend, and the two colors are this sort of really beautiful blue color and then this variegated pinky orange color. And I'm calling these my sunrise and blue skies socks because this makes me think of sunrise, and blue obviously for blue skies. So yeah, as soon as I get the two of these done and photographed, I will get the rest of the pattern formatted, and it will be available as a pattern for people to use if you want to use sort of my recipe for making vanilla socks. I can't guarantee that it necessarily brings anything new to the table over other vanilla sock recipes, but I know for me it was really, like when I was learning to knit socks, it was really helpful just to be able to look at lots of different takes on how to knit a vanilla sock, and and you know, pick out what I liked and didn't like. So once that pattern is out into the world, the next thing I want to do is I kind of, you know, to build on that, because of course once I sort of have like my vanilla recipe written up, it's easy to, you know, modify it for other things. So I want to publish a pattern for how I did these, and these ones I plan to write up how to do the gusset decreases along the bottom of the foot. I also want to do another version where instead of a rolled cuff, I do a, you know, regular ribbed cuff and the sort of traditional gusset decreases. And then I want to do another version kind of riffing on this same sort of 1x1 stranded pattern of tall socks. So it'll be kind of like a mix and match pattern, but all sort of with this similar idea of the sort of, you know, 1x1 stranded bits on it. So that sort of gets into a little bit of what's coming up next. So I will show you guys sort of the yarn that I have picked out for those in a little bit, but I have another work in progress to show you before we get there, because we're all over the place today. I take 1 week off from recording, and now my brain can't, you know, put things in the right order. So let's finish up with the works in progress. Oh yeah, let's finish up with the works in progress, and then I'll talk about, you know, some of those other socks that I want to knit. All right, 3 things before I show you my last work in progress. 1, I have another work in progress that you guys aren't going to see because it's not here, and that is my octo mitts. Those ones I forgot at work, but to be honest, I haven't touched them since before going up to New York. I put in a lot of work on them, and I'm on the ribbing for the first thumb, so I'm almost done with the first mitt, but I think I put so much like effort into them that I was just sick of looking at them. So I really need to get those picked back up and get going on them again, because it didn't take very long to knit the first one up. So I know that once I kind of get back into it, it'll go quickly, but the point being they're not here. So that's the first thing. 2, I'm pretty sure you guys will be able to see this. Yeah, you can see it right there. So I talked a while ago about this orchid that I had that I'd sort of nursed, you know, I don't want to say back to health, but you know, we had cut the stem off and then it regrew the stem and looked like it was going to be flowering. And as you can see, it's now flowering. So that's pretty awesome. It doesn't normally sit there. It's actually normally in my bedroom, but I wanted to bring it out, so I made sure I remembered to show you guys. But the last bud on it is just opening, so that's pretty exciting. And then 3, what was the third thing? I swear I had 3 things. Work in progress, thing flowering. I don't remember what the third thing was. Well, that's great. So maybe it'll come to me. Must not have been that important though. Anyway, so let's take a look at my third work in progress, and hopefully I'll remember the third thing I wanted to tell you guys. So this is the last work in progress. This is my exploration station, obviously, and it is getting very close to being done. As you can see, it's now gigantic, and I'm kind of having not good time with the light. Let me try and open my curtains up and see if that gets me a little bit more light. That helps. As long as I don't lean forward into the light, it seems to be okay. Okay. So I am currently on the last section before the border. So this is where I am. So if you're familiar with the exploration station, unfortunately I can't spread it out any more than this because it is just way too many stitches for my needles. But right, so let's see, how can I do this? There we go. Okay, so you know, this is the bottom wedge right here. This is the brioche section here. This is the slipped stitch section here, and then this is the, I think he calls it nothing but knit section here that I'm currently on. And like I've said before, I am, you know, just completely freewheeling it with the colors. So I have no idea if I've used the right colors according to the pattern, but I'm really liking it so far. I really like that pop of the orange on the brioche section. That's kind of what I meant for the orange to be, because my other 2 colors were so close together. I kind of wanted the orange to provide like some pops, you know, here and there. So yeah, my rows are just gigantically long now. I have no idea how many stitches I have, probably like 600 or something. Because again, like I've mentioned before, I'm using a US 4, which is a 3.5mm needle. The pattern calls for US 6. So I added an extra pair of wedges, which means that my stitch count is way off from the original, which means I have no idea how many stitches I have. But yeah, it's gigantic. And I have actually decided that I'm not going to do sort of the chevron border that's in the pattern. Let me grab this easily. Yeah, I can show you guys this. So this is sort of the border that it's supposed to have. It's sort of this like chevron lacy border, and I've decided I don't want to do that, just because I sort of feel like, you know, this shawl is so nice and sort of like round, and I don't really want a pointy border on it. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just do as much of this sort of knit section as I have yarn for. So the color that I have less of, this is how much I have of it. So I'll probably go until this basically runs out. And then I will do the final sort of like yarn over row in the dark brown color, and then I'll just do like an I-cord bind off in that dark brown color, because I just think I will like the sort of smooth edge more. Also because I don't really have a good way to sort of block out those points, so like they're just gonna look kind of sad anyway. So I think I will just really prefer it if it has a nice smooth even border on it. So yeah, but who knows how long it's going to take to get to that point, because like I said, these rows are just taking so long now. But I am just super excited about it. It's been a really nice sort of lap blanket, because I kind of have to like rest it on my lap while I'm knitting it. So it's been keeping my legs nice and warm. And yeah, I'm just really excited to get done with it. But I guess this sort of leads into the what's coming up next stuff. I'm, I guess, not in a huge hurry to finish it, because I don't have the yarn here for any of my sort of big projects that I want to come up next, right? So I know sort of the next thing on my queue is the Stramoy, which is that big colorwork cardigan. I'm now thinking I might put that off for a while, partly because the winters here in Virginia are just very, very short, and like it's 60 something degrees today in January. And of course, you know, it will be chilly again, but I just think that, you know, I may be past like the worst of winter here now, and I'm just not feeling like my colorwork skills are quite where I want them to be. Like I'd maybe like to do another couple practice projects before I embark on a sweater. So I think that one I might put off for a little while, which puts the next thing on my list as the Luella Cardi, which is this really beautiful sort of close-fitting cardigan that has this like circular lace yoke at the top. And I don't have enough yarn for it. It was something that I had thought about picking up yarn for at Vogue Knitting Live and then decided against. I don't even have enough yarn here to dye up yarn for it. So like, I just, in no way do I have enough yarn for that cardigan. So I just need to kind of figure out what I'm doing with that. I'm almost out of, you know, bare yarn. I have one skein of bare yarn left. So I want to order more of that soon. So I will probably just order more and then dye up yarn for it. But the point being, I don't really have a garment quantity of anything right now. So the next things I'm going to be working on, like I said, I want to knit up a bunch of sample socks for that other pattern with the 1x1 stranded stuff. So what I'm planning, I want to knit up another short version, like I said, with a ribbed cuff and traditional gusset decreases. And so these are the two colors that I'm planning on using for that. This is a 50-gram skein that I was gifted in a D-stash from someone. It didn't have a label on it. I have no idea what brand or what colorway it is, but it looks like a sock yarn and it feels like a sock yarn, so I'm going to assume that it is a sock yarn. And then the contrasting color will be this sort of lime green. This is a hand-dyed yarn, an 80/20 superwash merino nylon that I dyed up, and I had originally used it in that little flax light that I ripped out. So this is those two. The sunlight is just, I'm not having a good time with sunlight. Anyway, so I thought it'd be fun to do it with a self-striping yarn, just to sort of show how the pattern would look with a self-striping yarn. Because I know sometimes, like, if you aren't necessarily looking for self-striping, like, it can be hard to use self-striping yarns. But anyway, so those are what I want to knit up that second sample of that stranded sock with. And then so then I said I wanted to make a tall pair of those socks. And so then that gets into, what have I been doing for dyeing? Perfect segue, right? So like I said, I have one skein of bare yarn left. I had 5 skeins when I came back from Vogue Knitting Live, and I've dyed up 4 of them because I just kind of got inspired to dye some yarn back up. The light is just not agreeing with me today, I feel like. Okay, anyway, so the first little bit of dyeing that I did was inspired by my home football team, which is the Minnesota Vikings. I am not much of a football fan. I'm sort of a football fan by association because Wesley is a huge fan of the Vikings. And so that means I wind up following them just because he does. And we're actually in the playoffs this year, and we have another game like within a few hours from when I'm recording this. We're playing the Philadelphia Eagles, and if we win this game, we get into the Super Bowl, which would be really cool because the Super Bowl is actually being hosted in Minnesota this year at our new stadium. So like that would be crazy cool if you know the Vikings made the Super Bowl and it was at their home stadium. But I don't know. Unfortunately, being a Vikings fan is kind of tough because we have this history of choking at the crucial moment. So I have no idea what's going to happen tonight. But anyway, last weekend? They had a playoff game, and it was looking like we were going to lose. You know, the Vikings had the ball and there was like 20 seconds left on the clock or something. And, you know, it was kind of like, okay, can we get within field goal range? Because if they could have gotten a field goal, they could have won because they were down by like 1 point. So it was the final play. I don't even know who our quarterback is right now because we keep switching out quarterbacks because they keep getting injured. But anyway, he threw it to Diggs, I believe. And you know, Diggs was wide open. There was nobody there. So, you know, normally he would have gone out of bounds and, you know, stopped the clock, but there was nobody there. So he ran it for a touchdown and like with, you know, a couple of seconds left. And so they were calling it the Minnesota Miracle. And that really inspired me. So I dyed up some Minnesota Vikings themed yarn. And so it was really great because I actually had 5 skeins left, 500 gram skeins left. And then I had 5 mini skeins left, 20-gram mini skeins that I think I talked about. Like I bought this set of mini skeins to dye and I just was having a hard time dealing with them. So I figured, oh, I have 5 big skeins, I have 5 mini skeins, let's do sock sets. So this is one of the sock sets that I dyed up, and I'm gonna close the curtains again. There we go. Okay. I'm such a professional. Anyway, so this is one of the sets that I dyed up, and this is what I'm calling Minnesota Miracle. So the mini skein is this really beautiful golden color that is one of the Vikings colors, and then the bigger skein is purple and white. And of course, it is not showing up properly on camera because purple never shows up right on camera, but it's sort of a very dusty purple and then white. And I dyed up 2 sets of this. So this is going to be what I use to knit those, the taller version of those stranded socks. And I don't know what I'm going to do with the other set. Maybe it'll depend on what happens tonight or if the Vikings make the Super Bowl. But yeah, so that's one thing that I have dyed up recently. And that sort of ties in with the what's coming up next. I also have sort of an idea bouncing around in my head that I might do in between, you know, finishing up the exploration station and starting my next garment as a distraction from all the socks I want to knit. It's sort of an idea of something that I can't find a pattern for, and I want a pattern to exist for it. So, and it would use fingering weight yarn that I have in my stash. So I might wind up knitting something like that, but I guess you guys will see if that happens in the future. So I'm gonna hold off on showing you guys the rest of my dyeing until the knit along section. So let's talk about some new things. And I have new things and then new sort of other stuff to talk about. So it's not just new yarn, but let's talk about the new yarn first. So for those of you who watched my Vogue Knitting Live vlog, this will be sort of a repeat, but as I've mentioned, I went to Vogue Knitting Live up in New York City last weekend, and I thought I would share the couple things I got just in case you didn't want to watch the vlog but are curious about what I got. Also, the lighting in that vlog when I showed these off was horrible. Not like the lighting's working any better with me today, but you know, we'll try again. Also, speaking of Vogue Knitting Live, while I'm thinking about it, I saw that they are doing another Vogue Knitting Live. I mean, you know, the one in New York City is sort of the big one, but it's not the only one that they do. And I saw that I think they're doing another one in Minneapolis in November. So I'm really thinking about going to that one because, for one, you know, I have family back in Minneapolis, so I don't have to pay for hotels or anything, which makes the trip a lot cheaper. Plus, I can, you know, sort of kill two birds with one stone. Not that I advocate avian slaughter, but I could kill two birds with one stone, metaphorically speaking, by going and seeing family at the same time that I go to Vogue Knitting Live. And, you know, something that sort of, I had two conflicting goals when I was up in New York City, which was that one, I wanted to do the Vogue Knitting Live thing, and two, I wanted to see New York City, and I just didn't have enough time to do both. Whereas if I go to the one in Minneapolis, well, I grew up in Minneapolis, right? So it's like, I don't need to go sightseeing, so I could actually take classes and stuff there. So just a thought that I'm having. And because I'm familiar with the city, I was thinking that if I do wind up going, maybe, you know, for those of us who are podcasters that happen to be there, maybe I could organize something, sort of an unofficial thing. Just a thought, putting it out there to the universe. But let's show you guys what I got when I was in New York City. So the first thing that I got is a skein of sock yarn. This is a 75-25 superwash merino nylon by Yokogeni Yarns. This is what the label looks like. So there's the label, and then here's the details. So this, I suppose while I have it all close, I can actually show you guys the colors. So it's this sort of really dusty, beautiful brown gray, and then it has these little pops of like red in it. There we go. So yeah, it's really beautiful. This is a colorway that I picked out to make socks for Wesley. And like I mentioned in the vlog, you know, his socks never take a full skein of yarn. So I will probably, after I make him a pair of socks, have enough left over to make myself a pair of short socks with contrasting heels, cuffs, and toes. So it will do double duty as, you know, giving me some yarn to make Wesley another pair of socks, because he loves all the socks that I make him, and how can you argue with him? So if he wants socks, I will make him more socks. And then it will also, you know, make me a pair of socks to be my sort of Vogue Knitting Live sort of souvenir socks. And I'm thinking that once I get around to knitting this, I also might write up, you know, use these as a sample for writing up the man friend socks, which is what the last pair of socks I made Wesley were. Because again, kind of once I have that vanilla pattern tested and written up and everything, it's not hard to modify it for more of the socks that I make, because I basically use the same recipe for every pair. So anyway, that's what this might wind up being. Again, this was Yokogeni Yarns. I will of course link to them below. But, and I guess if you couldn't read it, I believe that the colorway is Riverfish, and it says one of a kind, so that's pretty cool. And then the other thing I got is some fiber, which is crazy neon. Let's see if I can, there you go. So it is crazy neon orange, and it's got some purples and pinks, and this is by Shears to Cat Designs, who, like I said, she did this other crazy neon yarn, this one. So this is fiber. It's 80% merino, 20% tencel, and this is 4 ounces of fiber. And you know, like I said in the vlog and everything, I really want to work on spinning. Like, spinning is a thing that I want to do. And, you know, unlike sewing, where it's like, yeah, I kind of want to be able to sew my own clothes, but I just am not, I know myself, and I've realized like I'm not willing to put the effort into it. Spinning is a thing where I want to put the effort into learning how to do it. However, let's talk a little bit about spinning. So, right, so I bought this, and I was like, okay, now I'm going to get myself a better drop spindle, because the drop spindle I have is just not good. And so I was like, I'm gonna get myself a better drop spindle, and you know, and I looked around Vogue Knitting Live and there weren't any drop spindles, so I figured I would order one off of Etsy. So long story short, I spent many hours looking for drop spindles before I think I finally came to the conclusion that I do not want to spin with a drop spindle. I think that's the conclusion that I've come to. So because like when I was really honest with myself, spinning with a drop spindle seems to be sort of about the experience of the spinning, right? Like it's, you know, you can't really do it at a large scale. So it seems like it's more so about the spinning itself and less about the yarn that you get from it. And I could be totally wrong, but that's my impression of it. Whereas spinning with a wheel is more about like producing usable yarn. And when I think about like, what do I want to do spinning for? I do not want to spin simply for the joy of spinning. Sort of the same way that I don't, I've said this before, I'm a product knitter. I'm working on enjoying the process more, but like I knit because I want the finished thing. And so sort of I want to spin because I want the yarn to get the finished thing. Like I think it would give me a lot of, pleasure to be able to say like, okay, I spun the yarn and then I knit with the yarn and now I have this thing made with the yarn. And it would be even cooler if I could dye my own fiber. So it's like, okay, I dyed the fiber, I spun the yarn, I knit the thing, and now I have the thing. Like that would be really great. And that's a thing that I want to be able to do. But I want to spin for the product, not for the process. So that has led me to decide that I want to get a spinning wheel. Like I'm done messing around with drop spindles. I want a spinning wheel. So I found one that I think fits what I want. The reason I hadn't really looked into them before is they take up space, obviously, and I live in a very small apartment, but now that Wesley doesn't live here, I have a lot more space, so that's pretty cool. So I found one that I think is the one that I want. It has good reviews in terms of like being a good beginner spinning wheel, and it doesn't take up a ton of space, and it's the Ashford Kiwi 2. Not sponsored, but hey, Ashford, if you're watching and you want to send me one, I'm not going to argue because they are not cheap. Spinning wheels in general are not cheap. The Ashford Kiwi 2, I think, is about $450, $500 or so. So this is not a purchase that I'm going to make anytime soon because Vogue Knitting Live sort of wiped out all of my discretionary funds, which is also why I haven't ordered more yarn. But yeah, that is sort of the decision I think I've made, is that, you know what, I'm just gonna save up my pennies and get myself a spinning wheel and learn how to spin, that way. Because I think, it's like I want the product. I want a nice, consistent, even yarn, and that's the way to get that is with a spinning wheel. So that's what I'm gonna do. And I'm gonna keep this on my shelf and I'm just gonna pull it out every so often and just look at it and squish it and be like, yes, like this is worth waiting for. I'm gonna do this. So that's a tangent about spinning, I guess. Full of tangents today. But okay, so that's the new stuff that I have. So let's talk about some new other things. So I wanted to talk about 3 sort of new to me podcasts. And I say new to me because some of them aren't new, but they are new-ish to me. And I have to look something up really quickly because I am a horrible person. And okay, I couldn't remember a name. So 3 sort of new to me podcasts. And the first one is probably the one that is least new, and that is Squirrel Pie Productions. And I know that her podcast is not small or anything, but it's one that I have come to relatively recently, and it's Tommy. Squirrel Pie Productions, and I will of course, link to the YouTube channel and everything, but I just have found that I really enjoy her personality, and that really for me is more so the important thing than anything else in terms of finding new podcasts, is finding people whose personality jives with my own, right? Like I kind of think of it like, would I want to hang out with you in real life? Because if I wouldn't want to hang out with that person in real life, why would I want to spend, an hour or so of my time hanging out with them digitally, right? Like, so she just happens to have a personality that really jives with my own. And I've really been enjoying her podcast lately. So that's one of them. The other 2 are newer and smaller podcasts. So I guess the next least new is called, I think it's Just One N, and it's Elizabeth Zimmerman, but not the famous Elizabeth Zimmerman. And I mentioned her in my Vogue Knitting Live vlog because I met her in New York City, and got home, watched an episode of her podcast. I think I watched her latest episode pre-Vogue Knitting Live, and then watched some of her Vlogmas episodes. And again, just a person that I would want to hang out with in real life, and I highly recommend you check her out. I think she probably has a personality that's pretty similar to mine, so if you like me, you'll probably like her. But yeah, I really enjoyed that, and I look forward to more episodes of hers, and I'll probably go back and watch a couple of the next most recent ones, when I get some free time. And then the newest is called Chevirel's Stuff. And she only has, I think, 2 episodes as of right now. But she's one who I know has commented on some of my YouTube videos before, and I love her. I think she and I are two peas in a pod. Like, she is a sassy pants, and I like that about her. Her podcast is a little bit less G-rated than mine is, and I say that, like, it's maybe PG, right? Like, she swears a little bit. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I swear a little bit too, but not on here, right? Like, if you met me in real life, you'd be surprised by how much of a sailor mouth I can have. But you know, she pulls no punches on her podcast, and she does a great job editing. Like, editing skills on point. So, or on fleek. Is that a thing the young people are still saying? Her editing is on fleek? I don't know. But the point being, I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to more episodes from her. So those are 3 podcasts I would definitely recommend checking out if you don't already know of them, or if you're looking for new podcasts. They're people that I think sort of have personalities similar to my own. So if you like my stuff, you'll probably like their stuff. But yeah, that's new stuff. New stuff, new podcasts, newness. As you can probably tell, I reopened the curtains, so lighting is all over the place today. But let's talk about knit along. So we've been having some finished objects rolling in for the knit along, so that's awesome. As a reminder, the sort of big theme for January and February is winter, which breaks down into a color theme of blue and a technique theme of stranded or mosaic or double knitting color work. I decided to include double knitting because you know, it achieves effects that are similar to that of stranded knitting. So that's sort of everything about the knit along, I guess. If you want official rules, I always try and link to the chatter thread on the blog. If you're in the Ravelry group, just go back out to the group and find the chatter thread, and all the rules are in there. But yeah, I've been seeing some finished objects coming in, which is super exciting. As a reminder, you have until the end of February, so still plenty of time to get in on that. And I have prize yarn. So I had mentioned that I thought about picking up some prize yarn at Vogue Knitting Live. Obviously, because I showed you what I got there, I did not do that. I just didn't see anything that really was that special, and I'm gonna get into that in the question of the week. So let's put a pin in that and hold that thought. But when I got back, I was inspired, and I dyed up some yarn as a prize for the knit along. So this is another sock set. So it has a 100-gram skein and then a 20-gram kind of contrasting color, and this is what it looks like. So as you can see, the contrasting color is this sort of really beautiful pastel peachy orange kind of color, and then the skein itself is this variegated sort of green. Because the color theme for March and April is green. And like I said, I want the color of the prize yarn to kind of go with the color theme of the following knit along. So yeah, so it's showing up a little bit more contrasty than it is in real life. Maybe if I hold it back here, no. Anyway, yeah, so, and this will produce yarn that does not, or produce knitting that does not pool, because this is dyed in a way that the colors, like the dark and light spots, won't pool. It'll be just a kind of overall modeled effect. So, and I think these colors just go so well together. So yeah, that's going to be the prize yarn. I dyed up 2 sets of this, one for the winner of the knit along, and then one for me to use during that knit along to knit a pair of socks that go along with the color theme. I realized I was unintentionally doing that with my sample socks because these are obviously blue. So I was like, oh, that's kind of fun. Like, because sometimes I feel kind of bad if I don't follow along with my own knit alongs at all. So it's kind of nice that I'm at least following along with the color theme. But anyway, that'll be the prize for the current knit along. Okay, so let's get back to that pin that I put in the idea of things being special. Okay, so the question of the week this week. So I'm sure that as knitters or crocheters or crafters of any sort, right, I'm sure that you guys are like me, where I will sometimes be walking through a store and I'll see like a knit blanket or a knit pillow cover or, you know, something, and I'll be like, I could make that, right? I'm sure we all do that. Or knit hats, you know, you're like, I could do that. So So my question is, like, for whatever craft you want to consider, right? So knitting, crocheting, dyeing, spinning, embroidery, weaving, sewing, whatever craft it is that you want to think about. Kind of at what point do you draw that line where you're like, I could do that and I'm going to do that and I'm not going to buy things, you know, like that. Maybe as an example, right? So as a knitter, right? I look at a hat and I say, I could do that and I'm not going to buy that hat, right? Like, I don't think I would ever buy a knit hat because it's so easy for me to knit a hat, you know. Same with socks, right? I don't think I've bought socks in a year, 2 years, because it's like, I can knit socks, right? I will not buy socks if I can make them because I enjoy making them, you know. It's like, I enjoy making them enough that I would rather make them than buy them. And of course, you know, if I got back into running and needed like sport socks or something, that might change things. But for everyday socks, I haven't bought everyday socks in a long, long time. Basically since I started knitting socks, you know, at a decent rate. However, you know, of course I will look at sweaters and I might look at a sweater and say, I could make that, but I'd rather not, right? Like for me, sweaters are one of those things to where it's like, no, that's beyond the threshold of, yes, I could make it, but I do not want to make it, right? So I will typically still buy sweaters, or things like blankets. It's like, yeah, I could do it, but I don't want to destroy my wrists like that. So I will buy it if I bought those kinds of things. So my question is like, kind of, where do you draw that line? I also have found that I'm having that experience with dyeing as well. Now that I've started dyeing my own yarn, it takes a lot for me to want to buy sort of indie dyed yarn from another dyer. And I feel horrible saying that because of course I want to support other dyers, but sometimes I'll look at yarn and I'll say like, I could do that, right? And if that's my response, it's like, well, then why buy it when I could get the joy out of doing it myself? Obviously, you know, commercial yarns, that's a whole different thing. Like, I don't do self-striping, right? So if I want self-striping, I have to buy it. I can't do certain colors, like certain colors are really hard to achieve sort of with my setup. So, you know, yarns like this, where it's like a really deep, dark, even color, that's really hard for me to do. So I will buy it. Also, things that are neon, right? Neon is really hard with sort of, you know, food safe coloring. Like, this is something that is a lot easier to get with acid dyes. So I will typically buy things that I want to be really neon. But you know, most other things, if I look at it and I say I could do it, then I'm gonna do it. So that's my question of the week, is kind of, where do you draw that line in your different crafts that you participate in? And you know, kind of what falls on either side of the line? Like, maybe what's an example of something that you're like, I can make that and I just won't buy it. And what's like a thing that you're like, I could make that, but I'd rather just buy it. Because I think it's important to identify where those things are, sort of in all areas of life. Like, you know, I know the steps on how to change the oil in a car. Like, I know how to do it, but, and I could do it, but I'd rather not. You know, like, that falls on the other side of that line of like, yeah, I could do it, I'd rather pay someone else to do it. Versus things like, I'm trying to think of another car related thing, and I can't think of a car related thing because I don't know very much about cars. But you know, but there are certain things where it's like, no, I can do this and I will just do it myself. So food for thought. But that's going to be it for the knitting type of stuff. So if that's all you were here for, thank you very much for hanging out, and I will see you guys again next week. Otherwise, I will talk a little bit about sort of, I guess, my life since the beginning of January, since I had a vlog in the middle there. I'll try and keep it a little bit shorter just because I know this episode is getting a little bit long, but we'll do a little bit of chatty stuff and then we'll wrap things up for the week. You know what else I realized while I was saving that last clip? Is that those Vogue Knitting Live socks would also totally count for the current knit along, you know, for us, because they have stranded colorwork in them. I'm amazing at participating in my own knit-alongs anyway. So, okay, so I'm gonna knit on these guys while we have a little chit chat. So I'm gonna say this a little bit tongue-in-cheek, of course, you know, so I'm joking. But the way that I would describe my life, basically since the last time I recorded a proper episode, so since episode 85, is that my life is just in shambles right now. And I say that because I am a person who really enjoys routine, right? Like I very much like, routine. I like to sort of be busy. I like sort of knowing what's happening on any given day, all of that stuff, right? Very type A personality right here, if you couldn't tell already. And I have not been able to get into a routine since basically the start of 2018 because we had the first couple days of the month off of work as part of winter break, and then we were back for one day, and then we had a snow day, and then one more day of work, and then the weekend, and then the next week, I was back at work all week, but classes hadn't started yet. And I was taking off Friday of that week for going up to Vogue Knitting Live, right? So classes hadn't started, which meant that I was going to work, but I didn't have a ton to do really. Plus, we had a little bit of a disaster at work that week before Vogue Knitting Live. So this would be not this past week, but the week before. And I forget what day it was, if it was like Monday or Tuesday, but right at the beginning of the week, I came in, sort of started my day like normal, checked my email, and about 9 o'clock, I saw an email from one of my colleagues who's over in the building where the main part of the department is. I'm kind of off by myself. I saw this email saying like, oh, the department flooded last night, including one of the rooms where a lab that I teach is. And he's like, you should really come over and take a look at the equipment to make sure that it's okay. So I'm like, oh no. So I walk over, and I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but where the physics department is sort of on the ground floor of a dorm. So there's the physics department, and then we're also in the basement, and then above us is dorms. And so this means that more often than is reasonable, we actually have things that get flooded because, someone blocks up a toilet or leaves a sink running or, whatever, and it will flood one of the faculty members' offices. So this is not uncommon, but I guess what happened this time is, kind of at the beginning of the month, Richmond had some really cold weather, and it's not like we're not used to having super like below 0 Fahrenheit temperatures here. And so a lot of pipes burst all over the city. And so I guess what happened is one of the pipes in the dorm froze. I don't know if they weren't running the heat at all or something. I don't know. But one of the pipes burst. And then of course, once it unfroze, it basically flooded everything below there. So this was on the 5th floor. So everything below there got flooded, including our department. So, apparently water, when people came in the morning, water was just pouring down from the ceiling in this room where I teach onto some of the experiments. So it was a matter of trying to figure out okay, what's been damaged? What do we think has gotten wet? What seems to be completely dry? And I was moving things around and putting them on tables all right, this is the stuff that seems to be pretty dry. This is the stuff that got soaked. And it was really bad. The computer guys, the tech guys who came in to take out all the computers and replace them, and they were picking up these CPUs that were sitting on tables, and they would tip them and water would just pour out of the CPUs. So it was just really, really bad. To give some perspective of how much water and how much just moisture there was. So they, of course we called in this big industrial cleaning crew and everything. They came in and they had all these dehumidifiers and fans and everything, like you do. And so they had these big industrial dehumidifiers with hoses that were running into big garbage cans to collect all of the moisture coming out of the dehumidifier. And these were these big, huge, I don't know, the top of the garbage can was probably about this big, and they were, really big, big garbage cans. And so the one that was in the room that I cared about, where the lab stuff was, it was filled up to probably within about this much of the top of the garbage can by the time they took it out. So there was probably, I don't even know, 50 gallons of water, 30 gallons of water, just a huge amount of water that was pulled out of just the air and, sucked, the humidity out of the walls and everything and the floors, just a huge amount of water. It was just crazy. So, And this, you know, kind of happened right before Vogue Knitting Live. And of course, then we had to wait for all of the equipment to dry out before we could test and see if it worked. So, you know, so I kind of left Vogue Knitting Live not knowing how things were going to go. And then, of course, you know, went to Vogue Knitting Live. If you want to know how that was, you can watch the vlog. But it was really great. It was a great experience, and I can't wait to go back to New York City to have a little bit more time there to experience the city itself. But yeah, I sort of talked about like my thoughts on Vogue Knitting Live and whether it was worth it and stuff like that in the vlog. So if you're curious about that, you can watch that. But yeah, so then I got back, and then we were, you know, testing out all the equipment, and luckily it seems like pretty much everything survived except for one experiment, which it turns out we had all the extra pieces that we needed for it to replace it basically. So that was really good because I was really worried, and it turns out that the tech guys had enough computers to just be able to replace all of the computers that were damaged. So in the end, it all turned out okay, but it was still very stressful when it was happening. And so that brings us to kind of this past week, right? So there were no classes on, like there was nothing, no work or anything on Monday because it was Martin Luther King Day. And then classes started Tuesdays. So, you know, we're kind of back into it. Although still, you know, I haven't been teaching yet. Like none of my teaching starts until this next week. So I still, you know, that's why I still say my life is sort of in shambles because I still haven't been able to get into a routine. So Tuesday, right, classes started. I had my first class of the semester, so I'm looking forward to getting back into taking classes or taking my class. And then Wednesday we had another snow day because it snowed like an inch, you know. And then Thursday I had class again, and then Friday, I don't remember what I even did Friday. Friday was a pretty chill day at work, I think. So yeah, so things have just been all over the place, you know, with snow days and, you know, stuff like that. So I'm really just looking forward to kind of really getting into a rhythm. Hopefully starting this next week, I think I'll be able to kind of get settled into it. Because yeah, I don't do well without routine. And it, you know, Wesley could tell you that I have just been like a ball of stress this past week because I like routine and I like stability, and without it, I just get very stressed out about everything. So there's that. I've probably just been a horrible girlfriend this past week, but I've been doing my best. So yeah, otherwise, I'm trying to think of what else there is to sort of mention. It's funny because we had a snow day this past week, and today was, yeah, like 60 some degrees, and the highs are going to be above freezing, I think, for the foreseeable future. So I'm not mad about that because I definitely think the older I get, the less and less I am enjoying winter. And it could just be getting soft from living in the South, but I definitely do not enjoy the cold anymore. Like I get cold and I stay cold and I don't like it. So I guess I'm just like an old lady now about that. But yeah, that's been my life recently. So I guess I won't yak on too much longer because I don't really have that much more interesting to say. And like I said, I think this episode's going to be coming close to an hour, and I like to try and keep them a little bit shorter than an hour. So I will probably end it here. You know, get some editing done while I work on the behemoth that is the exploration station. So that I can actually have it finished to show you guys next week. That would be great. But yeah, that's gonna be it for me today. Thank you very much for watching and hanging out with me, and I will see you guys again next week. Bye.